Hello everyone and welcome back to Make Believe, where we're playing World and Economica. Last time we had Yoshiharu focusing on the virtual contest. He told Hagana about it without explaining and she accepted it. But we know what the reason. He's getting ready to head into the investor world, so he's gonna leave the prize money for Hagana and Lisa so they can take care of themselves, at least until Hagana makes it to college. And we're about to enter the final sprint, I believe. So hopefully everything works out. We're not there yet, but we're on our way up to the score. I think we're in third place? Or did we make it second? Again, I spent that day in the living room entirely with Hagana, devoting all our time to updating the program and analyzing stocks. It was around afternoon when we had someone stop by. And oh yeah, they were so focused on working on this that they been spending time together in his room, and they even slept in the bed since they went to who knows when into the night. I figured it would have been Chris or Toyama, but surprisingly, it turned out to be Serald. Huh. You haven't come at all lately, so I figured I'd stop by instead. I kind of forgot his voice. I hadn't called for him, but I was thankful for juice and snacks he brought. Lisa basically didn't buy that stuff, after all, and I was not used to buying it as it would be a waste. I took a can of dark carbonated soda, one of which was developed on Earth, and in one way or another held near complete control of the market for 100 years. Coca-Cola. While Hagana drank 100% pure orange juice. Both of them were imports which, compared to the synthetic stuff, was several times more expensive. That was rather considerate of Serald, I thought. So, you two are looking awfully friendly with each other. He teased with those words as he put his hand around my shoulder and took a peek. The rustle of his hair was enough to startle Hagana, who was next to me. Serald, don't bother them. Before I could even complain about it, Lisa said it for me. Serald looked up and shrugged his shoulders. And I just realized, is he related to Gaimon from One Piece? His bushy hair just... What? Really? Really? I wasn't sure whether Lisa was copying me or Serald, but in either case, that was what she said. Still, it was without a doubt that it was for real. Hagana and I had long ago surpassed the level of just playing around. Hey, Hagana, are there any bugs in the program? Serald continued his antics and said that to her. Hagana turned towards Serald in her chair, looked directly at him, and spoke. No. Her response was enough to elicit a laugh at his expense, and Lisa smiled as she patted Serald on the shoulder and consoled him. I mean, in a way that's good news, because that means your program didn't have bugs, at least none that she could find. But as Hagana was in the midst of turning back towards her terminal, she realized something, stopped, and then spoke. It's an impressive level of completeness, in my opinion. See? I looked up and turned around to see Serald staring blankly. Then, like a good, responsible adult, he was smiling ear to ear. Next to him, Lisa had a gentle smile on her face as Hagana turned back to what she was working on. Everyone's just happy. One way or another, everything was in front of us as we moved forward. Well, with that said, we'll be getting out of your way then. Man, after taking the time to come by too. Oh my, are you saying that you aren't satisfied with my company? And that's what Serald and Lisa talked about. Perhaps owing to the fact that they were around the same age, Lisa seemed to speak more frankly than usual. That's not it, but there isn't the excitement of getting to know someone for the first time, though. Oh my, since when was our relationship like that? I looked up briefly and saw Lisa smile boldly with her arms folded. Cyril saw this and put his hand around Lisa's shoulder. Seeing this kind of annoyed me. That's a harsh way to put it. Beaten down by the rain, did you not have an inclination to offer a helping hand to save me? Was that not love then? It is love, and in total seriousness too. Those words startled me. Lisa was into Cyril? Speak of which, Cyril had boasted before about sleeping on Lisa's lap. On top of that, seeing as this was the first time Hagana met Cyril, it was highly possible that Lisa and Cyril had been alone together in the church before. An adult man and woman, and getting to lay his head in her lap to boot. Honestly, that did agitate me a bit. Could it be that Lisa and Sarah were an item? But Christ loves everyone equally. And just like that, Lisa ducked under Cyril's arm, and he did look disappointed that Lisa slipped from his grasp. Sorry, okay? You sneaky woman, you. The Lord will love you whether you act virtuously or otherwise, so you don't need to worry about it. I've fallen for a troublesome woman. Such a liar. As Lisa chuckled, Cyril scratched his large head. I wasn't sure if this was real or just some joke, but they did honestly appear to be close. And while I looked at those two, I realized that something pointed was directed at me from right next to me. Hagana was scowling at me. What are you doing? There was very little time remaining for us. If we were to overtake Mr. Trochet in first place, our focus could not become fragmented. Oh, she helped keep me on track. Hagana's anger was rather considerable. I turned back to my computer quickly and resumed work. But somehow, Hagana continued to look displeased, much more than usual. In the end, that day Cyril ate dinner with us. Cyril talked a great deal, and Lisa seemed to have more fun than usual. Oh, two charismatic, outgoing people. Yeah, I can see how they can get along. Also, before he left, he stood in the church with Lisa and they had an honest talk about the debt. Lisa laughed and evaded Cyril's questions. Even if it were a joke that Cyril liked Lisa, he was almost certainly another of Lisa's rescues. According to the policeman I'd overheard while escaping from the Lunar Chinese restaurant, Cyril had something of an amazing background. It was possible that Cyril succeeded in the highly competitive world that was Newton City, and had somehow fallen from grace. Besides, he didn't seem like a bad guy, and deep down appeared to be rather serious-minded. Like, deep down. Maybe he'd heard about Lisa's debt and wanted to help her as a way to pay her back. But I couldn't imagine that he would have deep pockets. Just listening to the conversation, I came to the conclusion that he did, in fact, live inside the Big Boat Cafe. Granted, Lisa didn't look like one to do anything arbitrarily, so I was somewhat relieved. Well, why I was relieved, I wasn't sure. But in any case, I was relieved. I stopped stealing glances at them and went back to my room. In my room, Hagana was updating her program. When I got back in, we continued our banter back and forth right where we left off. I wasn't sure if that forcefulness was more over the top than normal, or if it was just me overthinking. Maybe, just maybe, she's a little jealous You know, that might be me overthinking, maybe. And then, on that day as well, Hagen and I slept together once more. She seemed to cling to me even more than she had the night before. Oh, this is gonna be troublesome when he decides to leave after the contest. Starting from the following Monday, there would be only 3 days left for trading. 100 million moves left until we reached Mr. Trochet. Profits per day of 30 million, 30 million, and 40 millions would be enough. It can be done. It will be done. With that enthusiasm, trading began. But as soon as Hagen and I began trading, we started to feel uncomfortable. An hour elapsed when it evidently became clear what was strange. After a few more hours, when the root of the problem was discovered, it was certainly surprising. Did you two forget to eat? I can't calculate this with math. Hagana murmured, dumbfounded. After finishing my trades frantically, I felt exhausted too. We only managed profits of 10 million moves. With that, the hurdle was raised to 50 and 50 million for tomorrow and the day after. To make things worse, at one point in the morning, I thought that victory was at hand, only to fall into despair now. The problem is very clear. The number of participants had dropped off significantly. All participants were given 40 days to conduct trades, and after the participants who were done leave one by one, new people would come in at the same time. However, there were only 3 days left in the contest, so a large number of people had already run out of time. Certainly, those numbers would gradually begin to decrease. However, considering that a large number of contest participants either had part-time work or were doing this at their own leisure, I had expected that many of them would be trading the days before and after the weekend before it all came to an end. If the number of participants decreased, then the flow of capital would decrease as well. There's no point in wanting to trade 100 million moles if no one could even match 80 million. Hagen and I had managed to reach 260 million mole in funds, and with leverage at the time of trading, that would turn to 780 million moles usable. Today, on Monday, the number of stocks that we could throw these funds at had diminished. By Tuesday and Wednesday, it was already certainty that the flow of capital would have dried up. This was bad. Really bad. It became an exceptionally bad situation. What should we do? Hagana asked me a question. I had to relate to Hagana while I was pondering in what I could think up. Thus, I was that certain that as she spoke, she could guess my response to some degree. We have no choice but to throw funds into a large company. I wasn't sure whether or not mathematics could be applied to such a stock though. Rather, there must be others who were thinking the exact same thing we were. So I can imagine that tomorrow and the day after, there could be a certain number of stocks that would have focused on for trading. Would mathematics be able to see through that? I looked at Hagana, but her eyes showed uncertainty. Fewer stocks will make the statistics more unreliable. In that case, we'll just have to increase value within a safe limit. It was a rather simplistic conclusion, and thus we had no choice but to go along with this simple idea. We were like fish searching deeper and further as the water dried up around us quickly. Thinking in that manner, with Mr. Trochet having finished trading when he did, it was like he saw the situation we were in now. Genius. He was a genius. But we managed to pull within 90 million moles of that genius. It was a dizzying pace to get to third place, and things came together once we hit 200 million moles. Time mercilessly continued to flow, and soon it was the start of Tuesday. Hagana stayed up all night analyzing the trading data from Monday and updated the program to increase the range of available possibilities. I thought I'd give her a hand, but instead she said that she preferred that I got some sleep. Specifically, she said that there would be no problem if she fell asleep, but all would be lost if I did. It was rather sound and thus hard to refute, and for a change, I slept before the date changed. Though I only slept with Hagana twice, I found it surprisingly how cold it felt to sleep by myself. Aww. He's already getting used to being with her. Then, when Tuesday trading ended, Hagana and I did not exchange a single word. There was a possibility that we were simply tired, but the root of the silence was that things weren't as profitable as we thought. A gain of 22 million moles. To be fair, you doubled Monday, but still nowhere near enough. We couldn't even hit our quota. That left us with 68 million moles more to go. Oh yeah, why would it be 50-50? It would be 45-45 then, since they got 10. Participants dropped off more than on Monday, and the scramble for the last scraps of the pie was ferocious. In the midst of it all, Hagana was on the verge of tears, and her program was completely off the mark. Somehow, we arrived at second place. Or rather, third place dropped off considerably, and second place was now a practical certainty. However, at this point, we'd only received 50,000 moles. Once Lisa's loan was paid off, then that was that. I wonder if the reason Hagana didn't just say to quit at this point was because the 50,000 moles felt more to her like a borrowed sum. And on that note, I hadn't done any trading on the real market, so my funds hadn't increased at all since then. At this point, if Hagana were to trade by herself, by and large she'd be able to make money. Certainly, if I was out of the picture, Hagana's proportion of earning would increase as well. If that were the case, 100,000 moles wouldn't be out of the question, would it? If I could, I wanted to leave her with as much work with as possible by way of funds. 200,000 moles. I felt that it was the least that should be there, given how hard Hagana and I were working. After dinner, Hagana and I looked into current possibilities. There were now only two choices available. One was to do what we did today. The other was to narrow things down to exactly one stock. A single stock is dangerous. Hagana said that suddenly. But it would be impossible if we went with more stocks. The amount of funds for trading was ridiculous, and though anything could be purchased, it opened up room for more mistakes. At this point, we were more like a prominent whale in a dried up pond. More like a beach whale, like out of a film though. Unable to move due to such enormous body blowing out salt water in anguish. Once a purchase was made, the price would go up and all the others lying waiting would sell at once, setting the profit amount. This would drop the price back down and we would have no one to sell our large amount of shares to. If we sell them off carelessly, in the face of the very few buy requests, the only thing left would be to throw in the towel. The price will go down, and once low enough, a sell-off will begin. Going through margin selling, the same thing will happen. In the end, the exact same thing will happen in reverse. In order to avoid that, we had to be able to move our huge body around. In other words, focus on a single stock and trade with full force. By grabbing and twisting up all that selling pressure, a higher price could be forced. If prices could be raised artificially while the last trades were made, then we'd win it all. I wasn't sure whether or not monsters lurked in the last 10 minutes of the investment contest. If nothing else, with Mr. Trochet having already finished trading, right now, at this moment, we were the giants in the market. I realized that in order to win, all that could be done was to force prices up artificially and hold out to the end. Will everything be okay? That was all Hagana could ask. We have no choice now. That was all I could respond with. The room felt quiet during the night, and mere silence held complete control. Whether you laughed or cried, in less than 20 hours, victory or defeat would be decided. Last day. Not yet. It doesn't seem like I can do much else now. Hagana suddenly said that. Huh? How's greatest strength is my greatest weakness, after all. For a time, all we literally did was eat and sleep together. At the very least, we were in agreement on that. Well, I suppose so. When I said that, Hagana looked downcast as she nodded. At least, it appeared that she was downcast. At the brink of victory or defeat, I came to the realization that my abilities were not enough. When I'd first met Hagana, I figured without a doubt that that was the case. But things were different now. Everything was reversed. Honestly, I felt a pain as if a part of my body had been severed. It's too bad though. That's what Hagana said. She then tapped her terminal, and with a peculiar beeping sound, the light went off. If Hagana were an android, it would be the perfect sound for her if she had been deactivated. With the light off on the screen of the terminal, suddenly the room seemed barren, as if all that enthusiasm up until now was all a joke. That silence returned. Even after the power shut off on her terminal, Hagana did not get up from the chair. I understood Hagana's feeling to the point that it pained me to do so. To have gotten this far and not be able to keep going was indeed painful. Of course, she could watch over my shoulder. She could also try to offer some advice while running the program. However, the number of stocks under consideration was limited, and it was an undeniable fact that the more we had to rely on massive swings, the less useful Hagana's program would be. It was evident that much as Hagana's programs consumed me, the reverse could be said as well. It really was painful. Thus, it must have been painful for Hagana. Right now, look at the sight of her face as she appeared on the verge of crying. I wanted to say something. I tried desperately to make myself think. Was there not something, anything at all, that Hagana could do? I considered every possibility. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that I thought back on everything that I had talked to Hagana about. There must have been something, anything. It's not possible that there wasn't anything at all. Barton had said that excellent quants would turn everything about a trader into numbers. If that was the case, then there had to be something. And then Hagana sniffed and stood up from the chair. I thought we were gonna see a card. Good night. With her short utterance, she made for the door without even looking at me. Instead of her terminal, she had her photo-op pajamas in her hand. I was surprised as I wondered when she had grabbed them, and something in my heart throbbed as I realized that she had intended on sleeping in here tonight. And so, in that brief moment, I grabbed her arm. It was a rather reflexive thing to do. Hagana's wrist was slender and small, but the bone was firm, and there was a slight bit of flesh and soft skin upon it. I could feel her body temperature. Hagana turned around and looked at me. Looking back at me, her eyes showed unfounded tears. After being sold on Earth and having run away from home, Perhaps this had happened before. I couldn't imagine that Hagana's parents were happy to sell her off. Certainly, when Hagana ran away from home, her hand was held just like this. However, that couldn't buy Hagana her freedom, or stop her from being sold, I suppose. Powerless, only holding powerless onto Hagana's hand. Perhaps for a brief moment, Hagana had hope. If that weren't the case, then I would have been at a loss to explain the despair in her eyes when she first turned towards me. Hagana looked downcast and tried to shake my grip off, but I continued to hold on. Hagana tried a second and third time to shake me off when she suddenly started to cry a bit. I didn't know what I should do. I knew that this was a bad situation. Seeing such an atrocity in today's society was enough to make me cry as well. Hagana used the side of her hand to try to loosen my hand. I applied force and could see Hagana's face show signs of discomfort. Hagana couldn't move. She could only give in to force. That's how it always was. Oh. What was that? Force? Movement? Did Yoshiharu had an idea? At those words, my mind wandered off briefly. It was a sensation as if my mind was being assaulted by a message from outer space. With a buzzing sound, or rather, what I imagined it sounded like, the third eye in my mind opened. Hey! Let go. Hagana sobbed a little as she said that. Hey! Hey, are you listening? Oh, okay. With all my might, I pulled Hagana to me. Hagana's body was delicate and light. As soon as I pulled her close, she looked up from my chest. What are you doing? There is a way. Huh? There is a way. Your terminal. What? Your terminal. There is a way. There's something you can do. I said that to the teary, dark-eyed Hagana, whom I still held in my grasp. I reached out towards the terminal that was about to fall from her hand. What can I do? There is trade volume that's sleeping. Sleeping? Hagana repeated those words, then opened her eyes suddenly. But that path hasn't been... Exactly. There's a volume of all those who entered the trading with positions fully leveraged on margin. Someone looking from the outside wouldn't know how many were still alive. So, there's always a chance that sellers and buyers could be off in their predictions. If the trade volume wasn't enough, then all you needed to do was to wake the sleepers up. Yeah, I understood everything he was saying. Definitely. For example, imagine a stock that was loaded with people who had bought tons of margin and ended the trading. The margin trade volume was always open to the public, so one would know immediately who had been purchasing what. The problem was for sellers, particularly those who had hoped to make a profit through price increases in what they purchased with margin buying. It isn't clear how much was still in play and would turn with them to sell. If roughly all margin buys were out of commission, then the advantage will turn to us, the buyers. When prices go up, sellers would appear and the short sales that worked would be taking a profit. But sales wouldn't come from people who were profiting with margin buy positions. When the pressure to sell weakens, those who are margin selling would get scared and pull out. And in doing so, buyers should come out of the woodwork having picked up the scent, creating an artificial price hike. And if the margin buys were alive and the price rises, then certainly they'll sell in order to take profit. With the market in an uproar, there would absolutely not be any level-headed individuals who could hold on to their paper gain and wait it out. Sell before taking a loss. Sell no matter what. In other words, if the prices couldn't rise enough, then we would have failed. If within all that margin trading only we knew who was alive or dead, we would gain an enormous advantage through the psychological battle waged. Even now, with liquidity having dried up, this was the only way we could extract victory in this battle. Not gonna lie, I understood nothing of that. But hey, if Hagana can understand, then that's all good. And Hagana's ability would be able to ferret out whether the margin buyers were alive or dead. We were aware of the ones ready to pounce on people who had ended trading with open positions by making opposing trades, and riding on their action, we can turn a profit. The relation between price fluctuations and ranking can be calculated with math. That kind of operation was Hagana's specialty. Hagana pushed away from me, then sat down in a chair and turned on her terminal. It looked as if her mind was already busy with calculations. Will this finish by morning? At my question, Hagana's hand stopped, and she answered me promptly. This is simple. Those were heartening words. So, go to sleep first. Hagana tapped her terminal with force as she said this. Standing next to her, all I could do was shrug my shoulders. No way I can sleep now. Hagana's hand had stopped for a moment, but they then resumed their work. Numerical values were input vigorously and computed as new formulas were written one after another into the program. Besides, you'll be done soon, right? I knew that she felt annoyed at my sarcastic words, but even then, it was a positive, gung-ho kind of feeling I got from her. Hagana was not someone to call on a bluff. It was then, perhaps after 30 minutes had elapsed. Finally, with a resounding tap, she looked up. Immediately after that, the CPU and the hard disk drive... Why did I say CPU and... The CPU and the HDD. There we go. Because either I say core processing unit and hard disk drive, or I say CPU and HDD. Consistency. So let's rewind. Immediately after that, the CPU and the HDD within her terminal started emitting an unique sound. There was bar on the screen showing that calculations were in progress as the color of the bar filled from the left side to the right. As the stock data was completely inserted and dissected, perhaps it was making sense of things. After many seconds of silence, a list of stocks appeared. Hagana then looked at me. Which looks good. My job had finally come to an end. It was written all over the satisfied expression on Hagana's face. By her side, I took a peek at Hagana's terminal, stretched out my hand, and tapped the terminal screen. On the list, there was a surprising number of dead margin trades. In addition, ideally, the ones that worked easily with our predictions would be best. I'd especially love if people would jump on board automatically without a single thought. Those who had surrendered their thinking to machines were subhuman existences who had lost the privilege of being human. Barton's words came to mind suddenly. Yeah, I was thinking, like, isn't that sound like what Barton said? Or was that those were his exact words? It sounds like his exact words. These were the appropriate ones to feed off, I suppose. This one. Putting faith in my trusting instincts, I selected appropriate stock. Black Chocolate Corporated. Why did I have trouble saying chocolate? Like, white chocolate out of all things. I love chocolate. A name that sounded like some sort of joke. Sounds tasty. I know, right? Hagana said that spontaneously. You like chocolate? Who doesn't? When I asked her, Hagana's face stiffened, and she nodded. A little bit. What do you mean by a little bit? You should say whether you like it or not. A little bit. It can't be expressed mathematically. Oh? The quants not being able to express something mathematically? Hagana's words were enough to make me laugh. I know, I'm almost laughing here as well. Hagana stood up and yawned loudly. I'm tired. It's your turn now, Hal. She wobbled and stood up while pointing at me. Get out of my way. Jeez. Hey, what are you... Huh? Hagana looked back at me, as if I was acting weird. Except, well, Hagana was standing next to my bed, and had begun to take her clothes off. No matter how you looked at it, Hagana was the one acting weird. I'm tired. Really. As she talked, I could see that she was drowsy. Above anything I was saying, she was focused on undoing the buttons of her shirt one by one. I couldn't stop her, so I did all I could to avert my gaze. Hagana put her pajamas on silently, and with a final soft yawn, she crawled into the bed. At that point, I thought I could stop looking away. I thought it would have been better if she went back to her room. On the other hand, I wasn't opposed to this either. Two people sleeping together was warmer than one sleeping alone. I imagined that Hagana thought that way too, and there's no way she would have been unhappy about it. Move over a bit. A sigh was mixed in with my words. Hagana didn't respond, but she did move over. I lay down as well as I could on one corner to sleep. Hagana's back was to mine. As expected, it would be impossible for us to mutually this close together when awake. Somehow, I couldn't fall asleep. Probably because of that. Even though I was tired, I couldn't sleep. Even though I was sleepy, I couldn't sleep. It felt as if there was some obstruction that hadn't been overcome yet. There's one final step that he's needing to think of. How? In the middle of things, Hagana suddenly spoke. Huh? I responded in question, but Hagana did not reply. What is it? Was she dreaming? It seemed there was no response forthcoming. I was going to ask her once more, but I realized that she might have been talking in her sleep. That would be pretty embarrassing too, but she wasn't going to respond either way. I closed my eyes and made an effort to sleep. It was at that moment that I heard Hagana again. How? I didn't say anything as I looked over my shoulder. Hagana had her back to me, so I couldn't see her face. But I was aware that she was awake. Okay, so she's not sleep dreaming. I have a question to ask you. And finally, she managed to say something. I turned back around and responded. What is it? Hagana became quiet again. However, I hadn't expected Hagana to turn her body towards me. Suddenly, I felt as if I couldn't breathe, and any sleepiness disappeared instantly. Hagana placed her forehead on the nape of my neck, which caused my body to freeze up completely. Will you answer my question? In that situation, with that question, as a man, there was only one way I could answer. What is it? I gulped and continued. Is there something else you need to ask me about? What came to mind didn't amount to more than that, and anything else that I could think of, I could not manage to say. Yet, Hagana didn't acknowledge those words right away. I thought I would feel annoyed about her silence, but suddenly it occurred to me how stupid my response was. Tomorrow, what will happen if you don't win? I was so surprised that the words wouldn't come out. Hagana's word went through my back and pierced my heart. Tomorrow, what if I lost? With that, I now realized what was stuck in my mind. I don't understand the reason why you suddenly had an interest in the contest, Hal. Without understanding the assumptions, the conclusions can't be understood. Hagana put those small hands of her on my back. Her hands were unbelievably warm. If you lose, what will happen? It was just like Hagana to not ask what I would do if I lost. If I lost, I would be sold and disappear. The way she asked seemed to call out for an answer like that. My heart was beating rapidly now. It seemed to become so loud that I was dreading the possibility of Hagana hearing it. Perhaps she could hear it. For this long stretch of time, Hagana was cuddled up next to me. Whether we lose or win, the result won't change. Huh? There is something that I haven't said to you yet. Oh, you're gonna say it now? I think this is the same shot we had before, but it's still nice. Readying myself, I turned around the bed. Within the narrow confines of the futon, Hagana was in front of me. With one hand always across her chest, I could see that she looked cold. What? When the contest ends, I'll leave this place. Probably. She wore a puzzled look on her face. After staring at me for some time, she finally asked back. Huh? You see, someone invited me to join them. He's a pro investor. On top of that, an extremely good one. Hagana looked at me blankly. While she stared at me, only her lips moved coolly. And my trading technique and his methodology are very, very compatible with each other. So probably I'll become his apprentice. There was no reason for me to say it outright. Without a doubt, things could become bad otherwise. Although Barton was rather busy, he took the time to follow our trading records, and he usually responded to emails very quickly. Compatible. Yeah. More than me? Oof. Hagana was straight to the point. I felt she might have been angry as well. No, I changed my mind on that. If I had just made an excuse arbitrarily, then Hagana would be angry. Thinking back on it now, I realized that it was jealousy. More than me? After asking once more, I had no choice but to answer. The path you walk is different from mine. What do you mean? Depending on the answer, I will strangle you to death. Hagana's intense eyes were ideal for times like these. Well, how should I put it this? Well, don't you feel that you're merely compensating for what I'm lacking in? Her program was a clear indicator of that. As a human being, at the limits of my abilities, I was being assisted by the power of technology. Isn't the power of technology amazing? However, Hagana did not respond, and her eyes urged me to continue. But the person who invited me on, he's someone who is far more amazing than I am. On top of that, he's far more skilled in things I'm aiming for. Based on numbers in the market, I could see through the perceptions of people to turn a profit. But Barton looked at things from a more fundamental level in order to understand people's thinking. Stock was a necessity to move a corporation forward, and a corporation was a gathering of people. Thus, his trading technique was on a level 2 to 3 times above where I stood. So, that is why I want to learn how to trade from him. Take me with you. That was Hagana's immediate reply. That rather surprised me. Honestly, I was kind of hoping for that. I'm not sure how would work out, but I kind of wish that. I never meant that she would say something like that. I'll be useful to you, Hal. Besides, there's also the issue of the depths of the people in this town. That won't work. That was what I said, and then I said it once more. That won't work at all. Hagana was not sad at all. Just that it was her usual expression while her lips stopped moving. as if she were about to say something before she pursed her lips tightly. With that expression, the only thing that betrayed any emotion was those lips. Those lips tightened. For the depths of the townspeople, with just a bit of time, you could take care of it. I can't. Of course you can. Don't lie. When I said that, she raised her eyebrow. Hagana was incapable of telling a lie. Why? Hagana asked me. But maybe she was more questioning whether it was because of her investing technique. I hesitated. Hagana asked once more. Why do you need to follow that man? Don't you already have all the money you need? I was taken by surprise by words that I didn't expect to hear. Of course Hagana was serious, and certainly that was the result of her understandings. Hagana looked at me, and even now looked like she was on the verge of crying. Or rather, because of the darkness, I wasn't really sure, but it's possible that she was already crying. The money isn't enough. It isn't enough at all. Then you can grow it. That was Hagana's response. From the nasal sound of her voice, I knew that she was crying. I was lost, and I hesitated before I clasped Hagana's hands. It isn't enough. Not at all. But 10 million moles is not enough. What I want is 10 billion moles. Or maybe even 100 billion moles. There were playthings for children of that sort. Paper money that had endless zeros written on them. 100 billion moles was something like that to most people. But currently, the richest person of all mankind, the legendary trader called Mr. Infallible, had assets totaling 82 billion moles. Thus, 100 billion moles was not an impossible number. In Newton City, there's a road called Schrödinger Street. It's the focal point of financial alchemists who work at investment banks and hedge funds. It's where I must battle it out and win at all costs. For that, I must first train under the person who invited me on. I couldn't imagine that Hagana understood what I was talking about. Thus, when Hagana opened her mouth, the words that came out were not entirely unexpected. I don't understand. What we would do with all that money? This was Hagana, who, when given 200 moles, would find no use for it. I wonder if she asked that question only because she didn't understand. I looked away from Hagana. As for that question on what I do with all that money, I had that answer. But I was scared. I was scared of being laughed at after talking about it. But Hagana looked at me intently. Those eyes, they were frantic. Lisa had said to me to not push Hagana aside. If I were to keep this for myself, then I would be pushing Hagana aside. Having said that, opening myself up was indeed scary. Yet, I looked back to Hagana's eyes. Before Hagana had started trading using her software, she showed her courage while watching by my side as I traded. Seeing her absorb everything on the screen brought up a particular moment. During that time, while she struggled, she continued to do her work as a teacher. At the time, Hagana said something to me. They also have dreams, she said. I have a dream. This is not gonna be the... Was it Martin Luther King's speech? Hagana looked at me. And then she spoke. What is it? Are you gonna laugh? But even if it were pathetic to do so, I couldn't help but ask such a question. Hagana stared at me and, after a while, gave me an honest answer. I don't know. A bit too honest. I mean, yeah, you don't know if you're gonna laugh at something or not, if you don't know what it is. I was hoping that she would at least lie and say that she wouldn't laugh. But for Hagana, if there was even the slightest chance of that happening, she wouldn't say it. And didn't we already go over the fact that she can't lie? But I want to hear it. Hagana said it clearly. She wasn't lying. She really did want to hear. I took one step forward. If I were to have 100 billion moles, there is something I want to do. What? I was born on the moon. I somehow thought that she was going to say something suddenly, but Hagana did not respond. On that note, I continue. I'm different from those born on Earth. My birthplace was on the frontier of mankind's expansion. As always, Hagana continued to look intently at me, though I wonder if I've seen this expression in her eyes before. And so, there's no frontier for me. Frontier. Have you seen the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall? It was a place to preserve the simple footprints of the first man to set foot on the moon. Hagana shook her head slowly. But I know about it. There. The footprints of the first person on the moon are there. You want the memorial hall for yourself? Without thinking, I laughed at Hagana's words. Hagana looked hurt by my action and glared at me quickly. Sorry, but no, that's not it. What's the point of buying the footprints? Well, then what? No, what it meant is that, like those footprints, I want to set foot on undiscovered territory as well. Hagana, who had gotten angry at being laughed at, continued to glare at me with those intense eyes, but she did not try to shake my hands off her. Undiscovered territory? Yeah, but as Hagana said that, she looked somewhat downcast. She was thinking about it. Where could such a place be? The moon's surface had been completely traversed, and underground excavation was already progressing. Long before, Earth's surface had been completely mapped by satellites. There was no mountain mankind hadn't set foot on, and no seabed that hadn't been explored with observation vessels. I wasn't sure whether Hagana was thinking about human history or not, but after thinking for a while, she turned her focus back on me. I can't come up with a place such as that. I then responded proudly. Mars. With my grasp, Hagana's arms stiffened. Whoops. Perhaps she was taken by surprise there. But Mars is... In the past, there was the Mars Immigration Project with the orbital elevator. It was theoretically possible to reach Mars. But while the project was progressing, the moon declared itself to be an independent nation, and it supposedly became a political issue. Questions like whether Mars should become an independent nation, and wouldn't that lead to the flames of interplanetary war in the future should a planet become an independent nation? Besides, development on the lunar surface isn't over yet, so those plans ground to a halt. Hagana held her breath as I spoke. So, if I can earn 100 billion moves, I wish to continue that project with my own money. I'm not very smart, so it isn't possible for me to attend Lunar City University, study space engineering, and become an astronaut. But as a sponsor, I can gather people with the power of money, and even aid in the construction of space vessels. 100 billion moles is the kind of money that would be enough to manage a large country. Also, there is someone who has reached 80 billion moles. It is not a pipe dream. It isn't a pipe dream at all. I held Hagana's hand tightly as I spoke quietly, yet passionately. Up until now, this was the dream that I've spoken to no one about. If it weren't for this darkness, I'm sure it would have been obvious that I was blushing a great deal. But in the end, Hagana did not laugh. Instead, she said this to me. Do you really think you can do it? A realistic question. More than wanting to laugh, I felt my chest tighten. This question was enough to make me want to cry pathetically. That's not how it is, right? At some point, the hand I was holding Hagana's hand with ended up being held in hers instead. Keep going until it works, right? It is not that different. I had intended to say that, but honestly, I wasn't sure whether or not that would have been too dubious. That was how bewildered I was by Hagana's words. Amazing. I think it's an amazing dream. Hagana squeezed my hand in return, closed her eyes, and swayed back and forth gently as she spoke. She looked like a clumsy robot that wasn't capable of showing emotion in any other way. So, for your dream, it is necessary for you to win this contest? Right, we're back to the beginning of the question. She asked me, and I couldn't hold Hagana's simple way of stating things against her. Besides, at this point, I couldn't hide it any longer. No, that is a different matter. Different? Yeah, the contest isn't for my sake. I don't understand. Hagana replied honestly, and that honestly caused me some level of anguish. Caused? It's for your sake. Hagana looked at me. Huh? I said it before. The person who invited me on said that he could only take me. I won't be able to invest here anymore. That is why, well, as I hesitated, Hagana spoke. What? So, I thought that you should have funds to be able to continue to live with Lisa and be able to attend the university. 200,000 moves should be enough, right? You won't lose her books 4 times, right? That last one was a joke, but it seemed that Hagana was actually angry as she kicked my foot under the covers. Ouch, stop kicking. Stop. Idiot. She said as she kicked me. But it did dawn on me. Hagana wasn't angry at me because I was talking about her having lost that book. She was angry about something completely different. For my sake, why? Hagana cried and closed her eyes tightly as she hung her head down in shame. I was confused as to what I should do. Immediately afterward, Hagana let go of my hand and lashed out with all her energy. You idiot! I was falling asleep to the ground along with the futon. Why did I say asleep? I was falling to the ground along with the futon, and right when I was on the verge of doing so, my hand reached the floor. But this time, Hagana was facing the other direction of the bed, and was curled up in a ball. At that point, I decided to just leave her be. I stood up after getting my feet off the bed. The futon was on the ground, so I could clearly see Hagana curled up in a ball. She was curled up like a newborn, but her hands were wrapped across her legs. Looking at her now, she seemed completely different from when she was in her room, so scared that she couldn't even recognize Lisa. Thinking about that, it might have been because of Hagana's face the moment she kicked me out. The moment I fell out of bed, I got a clear look at Hagana's face. She was apparently very embarrassed, overwhelmed with happiness and embarrassed by it seemed. I hesitated for a moment, but at this rate, Hagana might catch a cold. But I also want to sleep in bed, after all. Tomorrow was the last day of trading. In the end, I returned the futon to the bed and got back in. Hagana continued to stay curled up, facing the wall. I thought I looked the other way as well, but I scolded myself for being too spineless. If you ask me whether this was a buy or a sell, I'd say it's a buy. What an interesting phrase there. And that's where we're gonna stop. If that was a buy or sell, it was a buy. And yeah, they're reaching the final days, so we had the problem. They found a possible solution, though they hadn't put it in practice yet, because it's gonna be on the final day that they're gonna do so. And they also had a heart-to-heart talk there, where Yoshiharu talked about his future plans and about his dream. So, things are moving forward. The question is, are they gonna have a good result? But we'll have to wait and find out. So with that being said, see you next time. Bye!